Hello, everyone. Hi. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Please, please, please make yourself at home. Wherever you are, make yourself comfortable. Go grab a beverage, maybe some snacks, light some incense, light a couple of candles. I'm going to wait a few minutes to actually get started into the lecture itself. Just make sure that everybody can get in and get a seat, right? The ushers, what is the deal? Let people in. They have tickets. It's fine. Let them in. It's fine. Please. Security. Or witches, as if anything's going to go wrong here. Yay. Hello, Patty. Hello, Eva. Mwah. And hello, 7C Mystic. Hello. I'm going to scooch this window and scooch that window. And hopefully I'll be able to see chat this time. Last time it was kind of like, is there chat? What's happening? I don't know. Still figuring this all out. It's an exciting adventure for my old ass to wrangle this technology bullshit. Hello, Lark! Yay! Nice to see you. Yes, Kristen! What's up? I saw that you subscribed to my Patreon and I was like, my girl is back! Aha! Time and space have nothing on this wild friendship. So good to see you. Thank you for joining. Oh my goodness. Woo! Samhain, y'all. It's here. Oh, okay. Not gonna get into it yet. Moments, in mere moments, we're getting into it. Like I said, light a candle, light some incense, go grab a snack, go grab a beverage. I would also recommend, yes, Eva. While we're waiting, I want to send love and prayers to my friend's kitty, Bijou, who passed yesterday and whose people are holding a ritual for her tonight. Bijou, thank you so much for your kitten energy that you brought to us in this crazy, crazy time. All your 9 lives, hopefully, were well spent with your humans. And whatever wild cat adventures you got up to that no human will ever know about. Aw, much love to them. Oh my goodness. Losing a kitty. Oh, it's so hard. Oh my gosh. I think I can almost always deal with human deaths better than I can with animal deaths. Just like, it's so unfair, like I can't. Oh, I don't really want to talk about it. Okay. As I was saying, while we are getting ready, I highly recommend grabbing some snacks and some beverages, light a candle, light some incense, but also you might grab a journal. You may have some thoughts. You might want to doodle as a form of processing. A friend of mine was just talking about that the other night. I was like, that's really smart. Or you might grab a tarot deck or another oracle that you like to work with. You might also grab some art supplies. I find sometimes that there are things that I want to express and words are just not going to do the job. But instead, it's a shape or it's a color or it's a movement of, lines across a paper, or curves and swirls. And sometimes those things, express what's going on in us better than any word can. So, speaking of art, the great Seattle artist Ryan Jack Allred is in the chat. Oh my goodness. Hi, Ryan. If you have ever been to my website, you can thank Ryan Jack Allred for that. Also, if anything's broken on my website, you can thank Ryan Jack Allred for that. He did it. Old school Las Vegas posse right there. Absolutely. Back in the day. Okay, where are we? 507? All right, we've bullshitted enough. Let me start by saying hello. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on this eve of Samhain. Obviously, Samhain or Samhain is traditionally held on October 31st, We'll talk about some other holidays or other dates that are associated with it as well. But today is the day that the sun goes into Scorpio. And for me, today is really the day where Halloween season or Samhain season like actually kicks in and actually starts. And so sometimes we have some lunar stuff that happens around this time of year too, depending on the lunar cycles and all of that. But for me, once the sun has moved into the sign of Scorpio for Western astrology, that is, I'm like, all right, that's it. Put the pumpkin spice away, get the mold and the mildew out. It's time to get real, actual spooky now. If you are just joining us, my name is Megan Angus, and this is the Wheel of the Year series. I've been teaching this series since 2015 here in Seattle, Washington. Mostly live classes, but Miss Rona had something to say about that this year, so we've been online and cooking, still doing it. And in a way, it's cooler because now I get to connect with people all over the country, all over the planet. You never know what state or what country is going to show up in chat, so that's always exciting. And, has really, as much as I miss the live classes, lordy do I miss the live classes. I miss being with you guys. I miss the physical altars. I miss being in our spaces. We've taught and worked in so many cool spaces here in Seattle. This has also been an interesting opportunity, an interesting adventure to go on. Sagittarius sun, right? Everything's an opportunity. Everything's got a bright side, guys. What's the matter? Don't worry, I also have an Aries rising, so I'm ready to fight about it if need be. Like, draw some blood. But welcome to the Wheel of the Year series, and welcome to the 6 weeks guide to Samhain. This class is being taught on unceded ancestral Duwamish territory. Our federal government and Seattle, Washington, one of the richest cities in this country with two of the most prosperous humans in the entire planet, still hasn't figured out how to pay reparations to the Native American and indigenous people that were already here when a bunch of white folks showed up on a boat hungry and cold. And so we are acknowledging that through this class series by paying our rent to a group called Real Rent Duwamish, which is a nonprofit organization that basically collects money and hands it over to the Duwamish to do whatever they want to do with it. They decide how they spend that money. There's no dictate with that. And so the folks that have bought year-long courses for studying this work have contributed a percentage of their ticket price to that project, as well as every time you buy the $30 download for an individual class, or you buy the $7 workbook for an individual class, a portion of the proceeds from all of that stuff goes to Real Rent Duwamish. And in the last class, I didn't have an actual number for you, and I meant to do it this time, and I forgot as well. But I'm pretty sure that we're pretty close to the 500 mark for this year, which is awesome. That's literally double what we were able to do last year. So super exciting there. And, pay it forward, pay it now, right? It's not just about building a better future. It's about building a better right here, right now. Thank you. And I also just want to say that what I'm teaching here, I think of as Wicca, I think of as witchcraft, and I think of it as paganism. I definitely have had some feedback from folks that say this is not Orthodox Wicca. It's not. It's definitely not Orthodox Wicca. No. But what I'm trying to do is bring you into the history and bring you into the theory that has contributed to this basis of knowledge, or this collection of work that we call the Wheel of the Year. There's no right way to do magic. Sure, there's plenty of arguments around that, but but if we line up all the different paradigms of how magic works, they all have their differences, and that's awesome. We want to celebrate that, but what I'm focusing on in this series is that there is a history, there is a theory, and there is a collection of ideas that people are basing their decisions off of. And then once you know that stuff, You can decide if that applies to you or not. You can decide if you want to take it or leave it or adapt it. But when you know why a thing has been included in a holiday, or where a particular symbol or practice comes from, you can decide for yourself, oh yeah, that makes sense for me. I want that. Or nope, that doesn't actually work for my paradigm, so I don't need to include that. So that's a lot of what we're trying to cover here in these classes. And all right, that's enough of that stuff. Okay. Please like and please subscribe. There's my YouTube clip. I think this is the first live stream that I've actually remembered to say that. Please like and please subscribe. If you want to work with me outside of these videos, I am also available on the internet. You can find me on social media under my name, Megan Angus, pretty much everywhere. I have a website. You can sign up for my newsletter. I also have a Patreon where you can sign up for $1 and get weekly posts on working with the wheel and the tarot that goes along with the Wheel of the Year, as well as my musings and rantings on politics and astrology and witchcraft and killing kings. And guess what? It's that time of year, kids. Time to kill some kings. Oh, and I want to give a big shout out to my patron and good friend, most importantly, the fantastic, incredibly intense artist and musician, Joy Von Spain, who sent me this incredible print from the artist No Bozo. I am a huge fan of them. You can find them on Instagram under the name No Bozo. They are an amazing illustrator, and all of their work is very inclusive and really supports a very progressive mindset, maybe we'll say. So big shout out to Joy. Thanks for the present. And big shout out to No Bozo. Go check out their artwork. They're absolutely incredible. On with the show. It's Samhain, y'all. It's time for spooky season. Let's go. It's time. It's time to put the pink Barbie dream car away and pull out the black Barbie dream car. In the immortal words of the great philosopher Bill Hicks, we can now wear our good clothes. We're here. We have arrived. We have arrived here at the dark half of the year. And so, let's get to some of this and one of those. Witches work. What are we working on during the season of Samhain? What is the purpose of all of this stuff that we're doing? The major themes that we are working with, major themes for witches, are life, death, rebirth, fate, and ancestors. Life, death, rebirth, fate, and ancestors. Those are the big subjects that we are dialing in on. And this can look like a bunch of different stuff. The way that we interact with these ideas, the ways that we reflect that we're going through this stuff in the world, takes form in a bunch of different ways. So one of the interesting things about Samhain for me is that you can have two very different experiences at this time of year. You can have an experience that is very somber, that's very quiet, that's very introspective, an experience that's very ritualistic in the sense of being, centered and focused and very serious. And then you can have a ritual or a celebration that is very festive and very lusty and very silly and over the top and loud and boisterous. And both of those forms of recognizing the energy at this time of year are completely appropriate. And in fact, you've got several weeks of the season of Samhain. You can do multiple things if you like. You can do stuff over and over again. You could have this on this weekend and that on that weekend. And we'll talk more about what that stuff is going to look like. But just I wanted to kind of set the stage with that you're going to hear things that almost are paradoxical in terms of, in this description of Samhain, we're talking about being really sad. In this description of Samhain, we're talking about being really festive and happy. What's the deal? Sex and death, baby. That's the deal. That's what's up. Samhain is absolutely a season of paradox. Okay, so let's get into it. So so breaking this stuff down, the first things that I really want to talk about are death and transition, underworld journey, and ancestors and shadow work. Okay. All right. I have my notes. Let me get them out. We have, as I was saying, we have several weeks of this process in terms of just actual Samhain season, meaning from October 31st approximately to December 21st, which is Yule, and that's winter solstice. So we could say that this period, this time period where we do this work lasts that long, but we could also say that this time period actually extends potentially all the way through winter, all the way even to Imbolc, which is February 1st, or even all the way to spring equinox, which is March 21st. Really depends on the paradigm that you're working with and the archetypes that you're working with, because different deities have different journeys at this time of year. Some of them are a few days, some a few weeks, some a few months. So ultimately, you potentially have several months to work on the stuff that kind of gets dug up in the season of Samhain. So what is happening? Well, the sun is dying and the earth is dying. And all we have to do in the northern hemisphere is walk outside and look, and we see leaves falling off the trees. We see bushes that were abundant with flowers 2 months ago are probably not producing those flowers anymore. The closer you get to the equator, the less extreme the change is. The further you get from the equator and the closer you get to the poles at the top and bottom of the planet, the more extreme these changes are. But they are happening no matter where you are in the northern hemisphere. Everything is shutting down. Breeding cycles for a lot of animals are done or done for now. Even a lot of insects. A lot of plants and animals, or not plants, but animals and insects are migrating to warmer climates and leaving the areas that they were in. And so for a variety of reasons, this planet that has been so abundant and so giving and so plentiful for the last 3 months, 4 months, is now starting to pull back on that generosity, starting to pull in on that open pouring out basket, the cornucopia, right? Like the cornucopia is starting to empty out. And we feel that here in the West and in the first world and in the 21st century. We feel like we feel it a lot less. I think on a conscious level, we think to ourselves, oh, I've got my electric light, I've got my heat, I've got my car, winter, whatever. But those conditions have only existed on the planet for a few hundred years at most. And there is an animal brain in us that is far, far older and that has been living through the natural biorhythms, the geological and the weather cycles and the astronomical cycles that you experience on this planet. And that animal brain has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, if not arguably millions of years. And it has a far different impression of what is going on at this time of year. It's like, no, everything is dying and I'm freaking out. We need to get a cave. We need to get firewood. We need to make sure that we've got animal skins. Like, no, this is not okay. Something bad is happening. The sun is dying. The earth is dying. What is happening? And the way that humans have expressed that is through their archetypes, through their deities, and through symbol. And so we have 2 different archetype sets that we're working with at Samhain. We have 2 different deity groups that we're working with. One group of deities is really concerned with life, vitality, fertility, abundance, growth, the natural world, animal husbandry, all of that stuff, grain deities, right? Vegetation deities, the Green Man, Ceres, as the embodiment of grain. Like, we have all of these deities from all over the planet that really are focused on production and abundance. And all of them are going through a transformation right now. Every single one of them. And not absolutely, but mostly, wherever you are in the northern hemisphere, if that vegetation or abundance deity identifies as male or is identified as male or male leaning or what have you, it's literally dying at this time of year. They're already dead. They either were sacrificed at Lunisad, which is August 1st, Lammas, or they were sacrificed at fall equinox, Mabon, right? John Barleycorn. But if they haven't been sacrificed by now, or Crom Dub, that's another one that comes to mind. If they haven't been sacrificed, they're being sacrificed now during the season of Samhain. And it's either a sacrifice or a murder or a death of some kind, but it's a literal death. It's an ending of this energy. Chop, done, bye. And then also, they're going on an underworld journey of some type. I should mention that because the underworld journey is kind of a big deal. So, so if they identify as female, or if they are identified as female or female leaning or what have you in that direction, then they are most likely not going to die. Or, in the rare case that they actually do die, they're immediately resurrected again within just a couple of days, usually 3 days. These holidays are really into that 3-day thing. These religions, I tell you what. So, usually, if it is a goddess of some type, she's not going to die or be murdered or be sacrificed, but she is going to go through a transition, a transformation of some type, and then ultimately go through this underworld journey, and then come back again. And that's really important. So let me give you an example of this. This is just one example of what I'm talking about here. In Egyptian myth, right now we're seeing the Osiris-Isis Set myth cycle happen, which is that Set, the brother of Osiris, kills Osiris and chops him up into a bunch of pieces, 13 pieces to be exact. And there are generally 13 moons in a year. So, wonder if that, probably not. It's just a coincidence, I'm sure. So, Isis and her sister Nephthys go out into the world, and they go to heaven and hell and the lands of the dead and everywhere else to try to find all the pieces of Osiris. They find everything except his penis, and they make one out of gold because my girl knows what's up. So they find enough of the pieces and cobble together what they can't find, and they put him back together and they bring him back to life-ish, because he is now Osiris of the dead. And he resides in the land of the dead forevermore. So he's murdered, he's chopped up, sacrificed, and goes through this monumental transformation, right? Golden penis, hello, that's pretty epic. And then forevermore he's changed, and he is referred to as the changed version of himself. And when I say forevermore, I mean the rest of that year's energetic cycle, because they do it again the next year, and they do it again every year. And so the next year in July, Osiris is born, and he from Isis, and he's married to Isis, and they go and have some cool adventures, and then once we get to this portion of the year, boom, he's killed. And changes into this other form of himself. So there's an example of what I'm talking about with gods at this time of year versus what I'm talking about with goddesses at this time of year. And briefly, we can talk about a goddess like Kor or Persephone, who begins her journey at this time of year as a young woman in the world, and she is very much the goddess of flowers, and she's very innocent and naive and filled with life, and very much associated with life and life force and fertility and beauty and abundance and blooming flowers and, you know, all that happy crap that those kind of people are into. And she goes down into the underworld. In some myths, she's taken into the underworld. In some myths, she goes down willingly into the underworld. And she does go through a transformation. She becomes the queen of the dead, but she doesn't die in that process. But she does go through a process that does transform her, and she becomes the queen of the dead. But when spring rolls back around, she comes back up to this world, the world of the living, and is once again the queen of flowers and the queen of, e-girls and what have you. And she's back to that version of herself. So she maintains this other thing and then just shifts form between the two. So that's an example of how we see these themes played out in our deities. If it's a male deity or male identified deity, there is almost always an actual death, sacrifice, ritual cutting up, a ritual killing, a ritual murdering, ending of the force, ending of the life. And if it's a goddess or identified as a goddess, it is a temporary chilling of the energy, and a transformation of the energy, but that she ultimately returns to Earth at some point and either takes on that other form of herself or has integrated this underworld version of herself or what have you. And we'll get a little bit more into the myth of Persephone later in this class, and also the myth of Ishtar. So what the other interesting thing that's happening is a lot of these gods that are dying right now, or being murdered, being killed, sacrificed, will be born at winter solstice. So there is this 6-week moment of death and stillness for them, where their whole energetic stream is like shut down or put on serious pause, and then they are reborn at winter solstice. And for Wiccans and a lot of pagans, that's the Oak King. This is the end times for the Holly King. This is the last moments of the reign of the Holly King. The Holly King reigns from June 21st, Letha, summer solstice, all the way through to Yule, December 21st, winter solstice. And then that is when the Holly King is killed or murdered or sacrificed or chopped up or dies. And the Oak King is born and takes over that energy and becomes the consort and the protector and the brother to the goddess and her various forms. A lot of incest and paganism, it's fine, whatever. Game of Thrones, you people love Game of Thrones. I don't want to hear about it. At least until season 5. Let's not talk about it after that. Okay. So, all of that is one group of the deities that we are working with at this time of year. The life force deities, the abundance deities, the fertility, virility, vegetation deities. That's one group. And we are seeing that they are all shutting it down, taking a nap, having time out. They're like, nope, this has been a lot. I've done plenty. I'm going to bow out for a moment and take 5. So who is the other group of deities? The other group of deities is the death and transition and transmogrification deities. It is the psychopomps. Any god that is involved, or any deity that is involved with death and any forces in our universe that are involved with decomposition and breaking things down so that they can ultimately transform and change into something else, right? But we're not at that part yet. That's in spring. We're not there yet. We're at the part where it's time to undo and break down and decompose. And so the deities that are coming to help us with that at this time of year are all of our death deities, change deities, transition deities, and any deity that could be considered a psychopomp. If you're not familiar with the word psychopomp, it refers to a deity that is able to, or an entity that is able to move between the worlds. And they are almost like a guide or a chauffeur or a chaperone for a soul. And we often talk about psychopomps in regard to them shuttling or couriering souls from the world of the living into the lands of the dead. But psychopomps are also responsible for the return trip. And so when a deity, or when a spirit or a soul is coming from whatever that is out there and going to come and incarnate here in this life, psychopomps will also help with that part of the trip as well. And so that imagery is going to be important to us as we talk about what all is going on with this holiday. So keep that in mind. Write that down somewhere. And if I forget, mention it in chat. So, okay. So, that brings us to our second collection of themes that we're working with this holiday. And if you're wondering what I'm referring to, we have these main themes here on the graphic. Here, I'll do that so you can get a screenshot if you need it. This is the big stuff that we're working on. But what I'm also referring to is information out of my workbook. And so these are the major themes that we're working with, and then we have these sub-themes kind of breaking these ideas down into something that's a little bit more accessible. Or, I don't know if that really counts here, Samhain, but as accessible as any of this is going to get, right? Sorry. Death. It's all chaos, kids. It'll be fine. Okay. So it is all chaos. What are we doing at this time of year when we're interacting with these deities of death and transformation and these psychopomps? What's happening? Well, it's sacrifice, it's shutting down, it is chaos, and it is rebirth through death. Just that. Pretty casual, actually, right? No big deal. It's fine. Don't freak out. It's fine. Okay. So what's up with the sacrifice thing? Let's talk about it, because I've said that word a lot, right? We have the idea of our deities being sacrificed. That's kind of intense. And we also know that sacrifice is something that has been practiced and is practiced by lots of different belief systems all over the planet. First and foremost, I am not going to talk about whether sacrifice in the traditional sense of, when I'm saying sacrifice, we're talking about killing a living being to a magical end or a worshipful end, a religious or a spiritual goal. I'm not going to talk about if I think sacrifice is good or bad, because that's not really important. If sacrifice is something that you participate in your belief system, do it. This is the time of year to do it. If you don't sacrifice in your belief system, don't do it. Or there are other ways to acknowledge that giving up of energy to an end or to a goal. So you do you. Not going to get into the ethics of all of that stuff. Not because I don't want to tread into murky waters. I'm happy to express my opinions, as my close friends and students know. I've got plenty of them. Happy to talk about it. But just because, genuinely, listening to myself talk about this previously in the past, I felt like I was too dogmatic and too eager and ready to dictate to people what they should and shouldn't be doing. Fully not my place to do that. So what I am going to talk about is how has sacrifice been used in the past and how you might use sacrifice in this holiday, no matter what form of sacrifice you take. Because while sacrifice does often mean the killing of a living thing to a spiritual or religious end, it can also, as I said, mean just the giving up of something, the giving up of energy to a spiritual or religious end. So you know what that means when I say that stuff. You know what that means for you. So listen to your gut. Don't listen to some crazy lady on YouTube. Okay, now listen to the crazy lady. Okay. So what is the point? What is the whole gig with sacrifice? Why are people doing this, right? Nobody really wants to die. Okay. As I've talked about in previous classes, when we're talking about human sacrifice, arguably, some of the time in ancient pagan history, there were people that believed in paradigms where they believed that their energy was eternal and they believed that they were going to come back. They might have even believed that person is pregnant with my child. That's me in there. So it doesn't matter if I die. I'll be right back. Don't steal my shoes. You still owe me $5. Like, I'm coming for you. I'll be right back. Just give me a second. Other people, while they weren't necessarily excited about the death part, they were excited about returning their energy back to the grand cycle of energy, of ebb and flow of energy, the inhale and exhale of reality. And They weren't necessarily eager to die so much as they were excited to rejoin that energetic circuit. Then, of course, you had completely involuntary sacrifices as well, prisoners of war and what have you, as well as animals, right? We know that animals have been sacrificed for these reasons for thousands of years, and they still are today. So why? Why are we doing this stuff? Well, like I said, some people thought that they were putting themselves back into an energy current. But what about an animal? We're not asking their opinion, right? We're just doing it. The whole point of this is propitiation. Humans are scared at this time of year. That's just the raw facts. This energetic cycle where we're seeing the sun die, the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, it's getting colder, the vegetation is dying. That freaks us out. And these are forces that are way bigger than any one of us individually, or even our whole village, or even our whole civilization. We can't tell the sun what to do. The sun's going to do whatever it wants to do. So these were humans that were looking at these massive, massive cycles and massive wheels of reality turning and thinking, I don't know how we're going to ever influence this in our favor. We got to do something extreme. That's my guess. We don't have written records from hundreds of thousands of years ago, oddly. Bullshit, I know. Nothing I can do. But I've checked on Wikipedia. It's not there. But we, looking back, it's like, it is this. It is this. It's a form of propitiation. It's a form of attempting to appease and curry favor with these massive forces in our universe, to try to not totally crush us. Please don't wipe out the whole village. Let some of us live through this crazy winter thing that you make us go through every year. And these forces appear to be tearing apart reality, right? We have just seen all of this vegetation come up and grow up, and now it's all falling back down and and it's literally going backwards. I have had the song Backwards by Coil stuck in my head for days now, working with this material. Everything backwards. And it really is. It's all undoing itself. We're unspiraling. We're unbecoming. And that's chaotic. That is not the natural flow of things, or is it, right? We get really comfortable with thinking that all of life and all of the energy currents around us are all flowing tidally in this one direction, and suddenly they turn around and are coming back the opposite way. And we're like, what? No, wait, what? What are you doing? Guys, this isn't okay. And so this is an attempt to appease those forces of chaos and appease those forces of nature, to go back in the right direction. Give us food again, please. Let the animals breed. Let the ground unfreeze so that we can grow our plants. Please, please, please. So I believe that this came out of a practice, or this practice came out of a place in humans where we were pretty scared. We were pretty desperate for some solutions. We were pretty desperate for some help from, or some mercy even, from these larger cycles and these larger wheels of forces in our world. But that's not the only reason that we sacrifice stuff. Also, we do it to appease the ancestors. We sacrifice food, we might sacrifice animals, we definitely sacrifice time and energy, money to the ancestors. And we do that also for a couple of different reasons. Depending on the tradition that you're from, you might be burning money or setting food out on altars for ancestors to give them that stuff while they are doing their work in the lands of the dead. We might be doing that to curry their favor because we want to ask them for help on how do we get through all of this stuff. How do we manage our way through this chaos? What did they do before? How did you guys do it back in the day? How did you get us to where we are now? So everything is undoing. Everything is unspiraling, and time in this last 6 weeks begins to kind of lose meaning. And that's a real exciting thing to consider given the year that we've all had with COVID-19 and the likelihood that it's COVID-20 and COVID-21, and that this is potentially going to extend for a significant amount of time. Time begins to lose meaning, right? We are just sort of drifting in the dark. And maybe we see sunrise, maybe we see sunset, but it's really normal for folks that have to work during the day or that are going to school during the day to be up and out of the house before the sun has risen, and to be home after the sun has gone down. And you are sort of living in a perpetual night or a perpetual twilight. And the days can blur together and the hours can blur together, and it gets weird. Literally gets weird. Start to see stuff, right? You start like, was that me, or is there somebody in the house? Like, what's going on, right? Give it another 5 minutes. You'll have that moment here in your own house, I'm telling you. So this sacrifice gig is really about trying to appease these forces that seem so much larger than us, and also to arm our loved ones and comfort our loved ones that are living and working in the lands of the dead, as well as to ask them for help and to ask them for their wisdom and their guidance as we move through this stuff. Okay, so let's talk about this stuff for a little while, as if we haven't already. It turns out I'm going to talk about things. I don't know why I say that. Okay, so who or what are these deities? Who or what are these forces of chaos? Well, this is ultimately the Lord of Misrule. These are all of our death deities, all of our transition deities, all of our psychopomp deities. And this is, this collective has various names. When we go through like European tradition in dealing with this, it wasn't just a singular deity. It wasn't imagined as just one character that was doing all of this work. It was, in fact, a great group of characters that were doing all of this work. And so what we're really dealing with is the wild hunt. The veil is growing thin. And the division between here and this reality of order and tidiness, where everything grows up and we're all fine, the borderlands, the boundary between us and the world of undoing, the world of the dead, the world of chaos, the world that is unmade or not made yet, that veil, that borderland is real thin right now. And energies and entities can pass from one place to the other much more successfully and easily than they can at many other times of the year. There are other times of year where the veil grows thin, but this is one of the most honored and one of the most treasured and acknowledged and witnessed times of the year for this. So we're talking about the Lord of Misrule. So, of course, now we're bringing in Saturn. That's another name for the god Saturn and the planet Saturn. And absolutely a deity that we can look to for guidance as well as warning. Saturn, angry grandpa, not super fun to work with, but potent all the same. But this collective would have been, as I said, the wild hunt. Other names for this collective are Wotan's army, the family of Harlequin, the Raid, the She, that's Sidhe, the Slow of the Dead, and my personal favorite name, the Furious Host. And this collective of entities was imagined differently throughout Europe by different peoples and in different eras. Sometimes this collective was imagined as this group that was very hallucinogenic and fantastical and, very bizarre and odd. And it was trolls and fairies and elves and bizarre woodland creatures and, beings that we didn't have names for. And, and some of our dead and loved ones would be walking with them, and they can make their way slowly or make their way quickly across the land, through the forests, over the hills, through the moors, what have you. You will meet them at the crossroads, where we meet lots and lots of deity and transition, lots of death and transition deities from lots of different pantheons across the world. But they were imagined as this hallucinogenic and fantastical sort of parade or procession by some groups and in some eras. And then by some groups and in some eras, this group is considered, it's imagined as very macabre. It is goblins, and it is devils and imps and demons, and it is stillborn children and suicides and murder victims and the lost dead, the unnamed dead, sort of trudging along. And on this night, if you were caught out on a foggy road, boom, you're getting taken with that furious host to wherever it is that they're headed. And so there were all sorts of traditions to keep us safe as we moved through the world with all these spooky characters suddenly coming out of the shadows and coming out of the corners. Our very tidy and orderly world is starting to break down, and suddenly the bones of the earth are being exposed to us, and these creatures are coming up from that fall and that rot and that decomposition. And here we are still trying to live and be humans, right? And we're like, okay, this is getting really spooky. So checking my notes, sorry. So this is really the forces of primordial chaos. These are all names, and the deities that we work with are all expressions of primordial chaos. They are all attempts for humans to put a face on this thing that is totally apathetic to our existence. So it really doesn't care if we're doing fine or if we're freezing to death. Totally doesn't care. So we've got these two. To come back a little bit, we've got these two massive groups of deities. We have our life and vegetation and abundance deities that are all dying or going through this massive transition, and that hole that's being left open by their absence, whether it's a permanent absence or a temporary absence, are all of these death, transition, chaos, psychopomp, change, transformation deities that are here to guide us through, force us through at times, this massive transformation that is unavoidable. It's happening. I can't stop winter. None of us can change the course of the sun. Elon Musk, sit the fuck down. But it's coming, right? So these are our reactions to all of that and our expressions to that. Our envisioning of what these forces are and how they move through the world and what they're doing, and then can we appease them? Can we sway them? Can we fool them, right? Okay. So one of the things that's really, really important when doing our shadow and ancestor work at this time of year is food and feasting. And this is where we're going to get into a little bit of the traditions and ceremony and traditional things that are associated with Halloween and Samhain. So feasting, very, very important. And there are lots of different rules and lots of different traditions to how food and feasting and feasts are presented and approached in various paradigms and traditions and religious orders and things like that. So if you have a tradition, if you have a family practice or a spiritual practice, do that. Like, lean in on that. Find out. Do some research. Go for it. But some of the stuff that seemed very universal for me is that the offerings are not touched. They're put on the altar and they are for the ancestors. That's it. Nobody's going to come along later and eat that food here in this environment. And ultimately that food is going to go on some various different adventures. But one of the more potent forms of feasting with our ancestors is something called a dumb supper. And I've participated in a few of these, and I have found them to be incredible. They are cathartic, they are moving, they're beautiful, they are fun, they can be really exciting, they can be a little unsettling. But a dumb supper, and the reason that it's called dumb is because no one talks. A dumb supper is a silent dinner that is held where we all, the living, do participate. We're going to eat some food and have some stuff, but also places are set for the dead. And our dead, or the dead, are invited to come and partake. And you load up their plate with food, you pour a glass of their favorite beer or what have you, right? If we're inviting Grandpa, get the Miller Lite out, like, let's do this. If somebody smoked, we put a pack of cigarettes out for them, and we make them feel as welcome as we can. And there's a couple of rules to conducting yourself at the dumb supper, and a few traditions. One of the traditions is that all of your silverware, your plates and glassware and the tablecloth and everything black, black, black. So you hit up Hot Topic or Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever. Or probably just dishes are fine as well. You know, like, if they're your ancestors, they know if you have the money to go and buy that stuff or not. So they're going to be like, it's fine. Just give me the plate that doesn't have a chip in it and we'll be good. So there's that tradition. Candlelight, a beautiful setting, a beautiful centerpiece, all of that stuff, obviously. Make an affair out of it. Like, have a good time. And again, here in the conditions of COVID-19, obviously either do this by yourself or do this with your germ bubble, whoever your people are. The one plus to this is that there's not a lot of talking. And during the dinner, no talking at all. So, harder to transmit. See? The pagans knew what was up. We knew. So, setting the table in all black or beautifully, as whatever that means, you know, for you and your means. And whoever it is that you're working with, if you're doing it by yourself, talk or don't talk. If you're working with other people and bringing a dinner together, talk, say everything that you need to say. Ask questions, make sure that everybody's got everything. You might set out a couple extra whatever on the table so that nobody ever has to ask for, you know, can you pass me the salt or what have you. And then once you are ready to begin, go silent. Now, as a witch, I highly recommend also, before you begin, create sacred space, create a container, maybe say a prayer, set your intentions, right? Say out loud to yourself and the people that are in the room why you're there, what you're hoping to accomplish. You know, what is the point of this dinner? Well, why are you doing it? Why are you participating in it? Everybody take a turn at saying that if they want to. Don't have to say those things out loud, but you might affirm them to yourself internally. And then sit down and enjoy your meal. And if there's any one thing that I really want to stress about the process or the ritual of the dumb supper, it is, do not demand the presence of anyone. Invite them. Lay their plate out, lay out their favorite drink, their smokes, what have you. If you got Grandpa's pair of slippers, put them under the chair. But we don't even necessarily want to call them. And here is why. At least in my opinion, here is why. Because we don't know what our ancestors are working on in the lands of the dead. They may have 4 or 5 lifetimes worth of BS that they are churning through, and they do not care about a slice of meatloaf right now. They do not have time for the potato salad, Janet. Like, no time. Working on some stuff. We just don't know what they're doing, right? We don't know what they're working on out there in their process between lives. If you believe in reincarnation, or if you don't believe in reincarnation, whatever it is that they're doing in the afterlife. But we want to invite them. And if they come, awesome. Then we'll hang out with them. But if they don't come, that's okay. We will hang out with your memory. We'll play your favorite record. We're going to take a sip of we're not going to take a sip of that beer, but we'll crack open another beer and take a sip of it perhaps, right? But we don't want to demand anything from the dead because we don't know what they're working on. We don't know where they are in their process in the afterlife. Plus, it's rude, right? Don't do that. So you eat your dinner in silence. You might keep a journal at the table, even if you want to write some things down, if you are having experiences or expecting that you may have an experience. And then when the dinner is done, when everybody has eaten their fill, you might kind of give each other a head nod of like, okay, it's time to clean up the dishes and move on with the next portion of the evening. Take that plate of food and scoop it onto a paper plate or put it in a napkin or a paper towel or what have you, and take that offering to Crossroads and leave it there for the spirits of the dead that are wandering right now and are hungry, and maybe nobody has remembered them. Maybe nobody else is giving them an offering, but now there's an offering for them. Maybe those spirits are just going to be the raccoons that, but that's okay too, right? They're doing work as well. We've seen the Dumb Supper in a bunch of different forms looking back through history, and a version of this is not so somber. It's much more jovial, it's much more fun, and it kind of leads into the other forms of worship and the other forms of ritual that we see at Samhain season. So, I'm glancing at the time. Traditional. I'm already an hour in. We're literally on page 1. Welcome to my class. If you're new, this is typical. So, okay. So let's get into that. So we have these very somber traditions, right? We're asking for help from the ancestors. We are trying to appease the gods. We're having this dumb supper where we are communing with our ancestors, and we're trying to give them some succor and some peace, and give them some good stuff that they can take into the lands of the dead with them. But we are also trying to dodge the forces of chaos, right? We're trying to appease them. We're also trying to dodge them. We're like, nope, I don't necessarily want to get caught up in that bullshit. And that dictates a lot of the traditions that we now celebrate as Halloween traditions. For example, jack-o'-lanterns. Jack-o'-lanterns, going back to our conversation about sacrifice, and sometimes not necessarily sacrifice on the part of a willing individual, the Celts are who, as far as we know, historically started the tradition that we think of now as the jack-o'-lantern, which is a gourd or a squash of some kind that's been hollowed out with a light in it. They have been using turnips and rutabagas and gourds and what have you for at least 2,000 years. We have the tradition of this idea going back at least that far. And what's interesting is the Celts, before that, potentially, were using heads hollowed out. Now, the Celts thought that the head was the seat of the soul. And if you were in my last classes for Lunar and Mabon, consider some of the traditional deaths that our gods experience at this time of year, right? Beheading, something happening to the head. So here we come now at the end of this energetic cycle, or this portion of the energetic process, and these heads are being used to illuminate and to protect and to ward off. And the idea was the skull would have been hollowed out, or the head would have been hollowed out, and a lamp put inside, and the light would have shined out through their eyes and their mouth. That isn't macabre at all. That isn't spooky and weird at all. Welcome to witchcraft, kids. It gets funky in here. And I'm here for it. Okay. So that is ultimately the root of our jack-o'-lantern tradition, is Celts beheading prisoners of war and putting candles inside of them. All right, moving on. Other things that we see as traditional Halloween celebrations: masking and guising, and that the ye old trick or treat. And there is a lot of conjecture about the history of this tradition. It is obviously very new to America, but America is a baby country, right? We've only been around for a couple hundred years. Historically, the first real records of trick-or-treating even being talked about in America in a form that's anything like what we do now is probably around 1910, 1920s. Finding it in Europe in the form that it looks like now, mid to late 1800s. So this idea of kids dressing up in costumes and going from house to house and asking for candy is relatively new-ish. And what's interesting is one of the changes that has happened in the modern era is here in America, when we say trick or treat, what we often mean is give us a treat or we will play a trick. We'll TP your house. We'll turn over your piss pots, right? What have you. Right? People still have piss pots on their doorstep, right? Okay. Soon enough, right? With this economy. So, sorry. But in a lot of places, it's becoming more and more modern that the trick or treat means the child has to do a trick or say a rhyme or solve a riddle, or they will not get the treat. And I was like, oh, hell no. Not on my watch. I don't think so. That's not how we're doing it in my house. No, no, no. So looking back through the centuries, this idea of a masked gang roaming the streets and carousing, actually very, very, very old. And our masking and our guising at this time of year relates back to masking and guising processions that at least go back to the Greco-Roman era at the very, very least. And there's a lot of different things attributed to it as we look through history and look through the various eras of different groups and civilizations using this idea of masking or guising at this time of year. So coming back to our ancestor feasting stuff, one of the things was that there was an era in European history where there was a tradition of doing these suppers for ancestors, but obviously the ancestors weren't going to actually eat the food, and the members of the house couldn't eat the food either. And so the poor and the downtrodden would instead go from house to house as maskers, as guisers, and basically pretend to be the ancestors of that house, and they would eat the food for them. Honestly, very intense energetic exchange there. Like, that to me is really, really intense. I am going to be the mouth of Uncle Phil. I am the one that will deal with the meatloaf. Like, that's intense. It's a lot to ask. Janet put raisins in the fucking potato salad. Are you prepared? Okay. So, and it was a big deal, right? This was a form of charity. This was a form of energetic exchange. You were sort of paying this karmic debt, right, by giving out this energy through this food. And at the same time, these people got to eat, right? And the world is shutting down. There are no more crops to pull in. The animals are not breeding. So this was actually a form of sustaining some of the more disenfranchised people in the community. And we can go on and on about how those types of situations shouldn't exist in the first place. But we don't have time. That was the last class. Sorry. So we see masking and guising in that practice. But in the larger sense, masking and guising was undertaken for a couple of different reasons. One, it was undertaken to fool those processions of the dead, the wild hunt, the furious host that's out there roaming the backwoods and the back roads. It was, like our jack-o'-lantern, which was this light that was there to guide us and to ward off negativity or scary things or the dark. Masking was an attempt to fool them. Look, I'm one of you. I've got a goofy, weird, spooky face on too. La la la. I'm one of you guys. Just gonna take a left when you guys take a right. Bye. Good luck with your wild hunt. And a lot of that stuff is some of what we're working with Carnival as well. Like, a lot of this masking and guising stuff really sits very comfortably with the work that we're doing at Carnival. And what's interesting about where Carnival falls on the wheel is Samhain season, right, is here. Here we go. Sorry. let me do that. Samhain season is here on the wheel. And then here's winter solstice. And Carnival falls here on the wheel. Samhain is, 6 weeks more or less before winter solstice, and Carnival falls more or less 6 weeks after winter solstice. So they're very much these sort of bookend traditions or bookend celebrations around this, finality of the sun that we experience on the shortest day and longest night of the year, winter solstice. And in the West, or in Europe, in the British Isles, we have the holiday of Uphelia, which happens really more or less at the same time as Carnival, and it is built around the idea of guising and masking and parading through the streets with torches, and not racist, actually. They're just really cool people having a great time, carousing and hollering, and there's, stuff gets set on fire. Yeah, it's just kids having fun. So part of this masking and guising tradition was attempting to fool the dead, to fool the spirits, to fool the demons that are out there, the dark that's feels like it's coming for us. And then part of it was also tricking each other, pranking each other, to prepare ourselves and to prepare each other for this inimitable chaos that's coming, this unstoppable force of chaos and change and transition that's coming for us. So masking and guising ultimately comes from that tradition of preparing ourselves and preparing each other to go into the lands of the dead and to walk amongst the dead and to walk in the forces of undoing and unspiraling and unchanging, and either to be ignored or to be able to kind of go arm in arm with our comrades and go, okay, this is getting super weird. Let's do it. Let's get your masks on. Let's go. And so celebrating life and celebrating vitality in the face of all of this death and all of this change is the other thing that we are doing at Samhain season. We have all of this somber stuff that we're doing, very reverential. We're checking in with ancestors. That's our fate work that we're doing. I don't think I really said that very clearly, but that's a lot of our fate work that we're doing, is we're checking in with the oracles. We're checking in with ancestors. We're asking for guidance and wisdom on, like, how do we get through the unknown that I'm facing, this darkness that I'm about to head into? What am I doing? What do we do? Help, please. And then we also have this very vital, lusty, fun, debaucherous thing that we're doing also at Halloween, which is partying and living it up. And really what that is we are insisting life in the face of all of this death and change and transition and ending. We're saying, I realize the whole world is dying. Bitch, I still live. My heart still beats. I still lust. I still hunger. I still have hot blood pumping through my veins. Let's get this. Let's go. And to be frank, it's a little desperate. We are a little like, there's a little of that energy, to be fair. But that kind of, it spurs us, right? Like, we're seeing this massive system shut down around us. And so there is this sort of very vital urge in us that's like, no, I will not go into the darkening of the light. Not going to happen, kids. Okay. Before we move on to the next part, just briefly, those last few bits that we're talking about, healing, purification, rest after labor, and celebration of life, that's exactly what this other form of, or the other versions of Samhain that we work with are. We're celebrating after this massive labor of bringing in the harvest in. There's no more work to be done. Everything's being stored or has been stored, and there's time to hang out and party just a little bit before winter really, really starts to set in. And I guess I should see, here's my tangents. I guess I should say that there are that cleansing and protection stuff that we're doing at this time of year. There's a lot of protection and purification rituals that happen. Some of the animals that would have been sacrificed at this time of year, blood would be taken from them and scattered at the edges of the property or around the home, or very specifically around the storage areas of grain. And mentioning storage areas, that's one of the places where that was an absolute no-go. On October 31st, the veil is thin. Do not mess with storage areas, grain silos. Bad scene. I don't know why, but very consistent tradition throughout European history. October 31st, grain silos and storage areas and styles. Stay the hell away. Back up. Back off. Nothing to see here. Just steer clear. But we've got these carnival type processions of masking and carousing through the streets. That type of stuff is where we get names for this holiday, like Devil's Night or Mischief Night, those types of things. We would have the rich giving food to the poor. Things like bobbing for apples, that was a form of fate, that was casting lots. And if you managed to be able to grab an apple, you were going to have a great year. And if you didn't manage to grab an apple, you were probably going to die in the next 12 months. Sorry. Same with things like chestnuts roasting over an open fire type thing. You would take a chestnut and throw it into the fire, and if it popped, you were going to die. But if it just sat there and did absolutely nothing, you were going to be okay. Like, everything was this very severe, probably not going to make it through winter gym. So I don't make the rules. I didn't do it. Okay. Another thing that we see at this time of year that's also very consistent with Carnival is something from the Irish Gaelic called barmbrack, which is an oat cake that would have been baked with little charms stuck in it. And then someone married bakes the cake, and out of sight from everybody else, they butter the cake and they chop it up into a bunch of pieces, and then they bring it out into the room. And depending on the charm that you find in the cake, that's what you're going to get for the next year. One of my favorites was if you get a stick, if there's a stick charm in your slice of cake, that means you're going to beat your spouse. And I was like, don't put the stick in there. Like, what is the gig with that? Just don't, like, put a therapist in the cake. Like, why, Ireland? Why are you doing this? That's not good. It's not good. But that's, very similar to king cake, right? Very similar to, again, that tradition that we see at Carnival. Okay. What other things? We don't even need to go into it. A lot of stuff. Oh, one of my other favorite things about feasting and entertainment was when you were having something not like the dumb supper of silence, but you're having your ancestral supper. At some point, all of the elders in the room get together, they pour a glass of something good to drink, and they go and sit by the fire, and they gossip loudly about all the stuff that's gone down over the last year. They go and sit by the fire and shit talk for the dead, for the ancestors who weren't here to witness and participate in whatever it was. So it's, it's like, Gail went ahead and slept with that guy, and she didn't even get a goat, like that whole thing, which I just think that is so great. So if you participate in any of these festivals, I definitely, or any of these forms of celebration or any of these rituals, definitely recommend the shit talking on behalf of the dead. I think that's one of the better, cooler things that we could do. Okay. There's so many different things, but there's just no time. As usual. I may put up my 2019 lecture because this has stuff that didn't, and that will have stuff that this didn't, because it's like that every year. Okay, so briefly, some of the alternate names of this holiday are, let's see, which is New Year, Third Harvest, Blood Harvest, Devil's Night, Spirit Night, Day of the Banshee, and Feast of Saradwin and Belly. Saradwin and Belly are some of our grain and harvest, grain and fecundity deities that we're working with in the Welsh, Scotch, Ireland area. Which is New Year because we are seeing the full shutdown and restarting of the energetic cycle. Third Harvest, this is in fact the third harvest, and the other name for it is the Blood Harvest. Another name for it is the Nut Harvest, because a lot of our nut trees are actually coming ripe at this time of year. Again, hazelnuts and chestnuts being really appropriate at this time of year. So our first harvest is Lammas and Lughnasadh. Our second harvest, that's August 1st, our second harvest is fall equinox, approximately September 21st, that's Mabon, and then this is the third harvest, Samhain. So it recognizes the end of the massive harvest season that starts all the way back in July and August. And the reason that it's called the Blood Harvest, yes, because of sacrifice at this time, but sacrifice also in the sense of folks that were pastoral and had to deal with animals, you have to decide which animals are going to live through winter and which animals are going to be sacrificed, because it is likely that you will not be able to feed them all. You will probably not have it, depending on how good your grain harvest was, you may or may not have enough feed for your animals to get you all the way through until next year, when you can turn them back out to pasture. So some animals were going to live and some animals were going to die. And again, here comes that fate thing. Here comes that chaos thing, and that beseeching of ancestors for wisdom, right? Because if you misstep here, if you guess wrong, you could keep too many animals alive, and now there's not enough feed for them, and we're starting to get into the human stores to keep them alive. If you kill too many, maybe we don't have enough next year, or maybe now this isn't good for winter, or what have you. So it was this huge juggling act that folks had to go through, and still do. This is still happening around the country or around the world. So blood harvest, absolutely. Devil's Night, that speaks to that mischief making and masking and marauding through the streets. And Spirit Night, that's our veil coming through and being very thin. Day of the Banshee, this speaks to some of the more spiritual names around this holiday. So one of my favorite names for this holiday, because I can actually pronounce it, is Phelan Amorf, or Phelan Mongunga, and that is Irish Gaelic. Sorry if you're actually from Ireland and speak Gaelic. Please get a hold of me and teach me how to say these words correctly, because I really want to know. What we're saying is the Feast of the White Queen, the Feast of the White Witch, Day of the Banshee, and we're recognizing in Wicca and witchcraft and paganism the transition of the great goddess in her triplicity form from the Great Mother into the Great Crone. And so that's really where we are in our goddess work that we're doing, is we're watching the Great Mother give this final thrust of production, and then ultimately change and transform, right? We've already said that. We know that's what's happening with our goddesses at this time of year. It's transformation and change. The Mother Goddess doesn't die. She just turns into the crone. She changes shape and is now the crone. And that, I don't always list off deities for you to work with, because a lot of this stuff is very subjective for people, but I definitely recommend doing research around Kaleach, the Morrigan, Morgan Le Fay, Baba Yaga, Banshee, Oya, Mama Chola, Nephthys, Persephone. These are all different goddesses from different pantheons that move into this crone form. They are mother goddesses, and they move into, or they are associated with mother goddesses, and they move into this death form, this crone form. And then, as we said, for the Holly King, see ya, kid. Out of here. The Dark King, the Dark Twin, is dying. All gods, especially any gods associated with life and fertility and abundance, are all dying or dead and all transitioning. Okay, so let's move on to another slide, shall we? Looking around the planet at different religious systems and belief systems and cultural practices, what are we seeing? A lot of the same stuff that pagans are doing. Endings, beginnings, transformations, fate, rites of passage, sex, death, and chaos. And so if we're talking about just holidays that are actually celebrated October 31st, November 1st, November 2nd, we have Dias de los Muertos in Mexico, which actually is not oriented in Catholic tradition. It was an Aztec tradition. Catholics, telling you, y'all get your own, stop jumping on everybody else's train. We have the Huero Festival for Yoruba folk. We have the Day of the Banshee in Ireland. We have the Rites of Hell for Asatru and Norse folk. We have Nos Caelan Gaea for Welsh witches. The Feast of Baron Zamadi for Vodun practitioners, the Descent of Inanna in Sumerian belief, and New Year's, in fact, in Babylonia, which would have been Ishtar. And so we have this ending beginning thing really packed in to our beliefs going back 5,000 years or more. And then other holidays that are happening at this time of year, like in this whole chunk of late October through November and into December, because it gets a little blurry in the middle of December, are things like Thesmophoria, which is the bitching festival from Greece. I love this festival so much. It just happened, actually. It was October 16, 17, 18 this year. The bitching festival is, it's incredible. Just look it up. Thesmophoria. Other stuff that's happening at this time of year, we have Witches' Remembrance Day on November 6th. We have Nicknevin, the Old Celtic New Year, on November 7th, and November 7th is Solar Samhain. We have the Feast of Oya, November 25th, Transgender Remembrance Day on November 20th. All of this stuff is in your calendar, by the way, in the back of the workbook. The Feast of St. Hilda, patron saint of our working women. Goddess bless sex workers, because you are doing the real work out there. And of course, on November 5th, we have Guy Fawkes Day. Great piece here by Nobozo. We Killed All Your Kings. Guy Fawkes Day. Look it up. A penny for the old guy. That's all I'll say, because I don't want somebody coming after me, because this is a live stream. But, DM me if you're curious. Other stuff that we're looking at this time of year. I think the two of the most important things that are happening at this time of year are actually happening for Hindu practitioners, and that is the Diwali Festival, which is a festival of lights. It's a multi-week festival, and they basically have two New Years a year, and they have one that introduces the dark half of the year and one that introduces the light. Diwali introduces the dark half of the year. Holi, our festival of colors, Holi, that happens in spring. That welcomes in the light half of the year. And so this is a triumph of good over evil. During this festival, we see Lakshmi. Her traditional husband is asleep, and she goes and sleeps with and has sex with her old husband. So that sex and death and transition thing that's going on. But Diwali is celebrated in a bunch of different ways, but there's a lot of lamp lighting and putting up lights around the home, twinkler lights and sparkler lights and what have you. But also buying something new to welcome in the new half of the year, buying yourself a new piece of clothing, buying something new for the house. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's really about the symbol of bringing in new energy, and that was how we started the new part of the year. Here's their symbol for that. So very important. And then also from the Hindu, we have the Kali Puja. The Kali Puja this year takes place on November 14th. And this is the Hindu festival honoring the great goddess Mahadevi Kali, who is the embodiment of decay, death, and transformation. She is a great goddess, and she births and sustains and destroys. And during the Kali Puja, she is worshipped in all of her forms in various temples around India. Her temples run red with the blood of sacrificed animals, and that blood is then taken, and people fertilize and bless and protect their land and their other animals and their home and their family members. But she is very much worshipped in all three forms, but very much as the destroyer at this time of year, as the one who breaks the thing that is ready to be broken and allows the cycle of energy to go forward and continue. If you would like to work with Kali energy at this time of year, drink some sweet hibiscus tea. She loves candy. She loves sweets, meats, and blood. And if you have a statue of Kali, this is a great time of year to rub a little ghee on her face, because she loves to look beautiful. She loves a little moisturizer on her cheeks so she doesn't look ashy. It's literally what's up. So a little ghee on her cheeks, and you'll make your Kali happy in your home. And then also the Feast of Hekate. The last night of every lunar cycle was in the ancient world dedicated to Hekate, and the way that you would worship her was to have a big dinner and talk about any magic that you had participated in throughout the month, and maybe do some magic that night. You might trade spells. You might say, oh, look at this wand I made. Oh, that's cool. Check it out. And you would discuss your highs and lows and your successes and your failures with your magical practices over the course of the month. Last night of the lunar cycle, that's generally the very last nights before the new moon. I know other people celebrate her on the full moon or the night just before the full moon. So, do what you feel. But it's about that darkness with her is where I gravitate towards witnessing her holiday there at the end of the lunar cycle. So every month, at the end of the lunar cycle, Hekate, but in particular, the Scorpio lunar cycle, the last night before the Scorpio new moon. That is going to be an incredibly potent time to work with Hekate and any goddesses like her that are doing the work that she does. Worshippers get together, discuss magical practices, and leave offerings for the triple goddess at crossroads. So there's another crossroads thing. There's another offering at the crossroads moment. And then we're also seeing Wobuchim, which is the Hopi New Fire ceremony dedicated to Masao, the god of death, and the Earth Mother Spider Woman. We're also seeing, at this time, December 5th, Krampusnacht. And of course, Krampusnacht is this really great end of, fall, just about winter, but not quite, sort of demonic, freakish entity. And side note, one of my favorite things is looking at the way that Krampusnacht is depicted. He often has these big tusks or fangs, and he almost has this big lolling tongue hanging out. He looks exactly like Kali. I absolutely love it. And Krampusnacht is a European, now global tradition that celebrated somewhere between Samhain and Yule. It's different in different areas of Europe. Sometimes it's moved to, the Sunday after blah, 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 or whatever, or the first Saturday of the month or whatever. But it features this Krampus character, a troll-like demon that terrorizes children and punishes sinners by whipping them. Okay! We love it. And again, with this whole whipping thing and looking at the correlations between Samhain season and Imbolc season, we have Lupercalia happen at Imbolc season, and there's a lot of whipping people in the streets during Lupercalia. So the Europeans into the public, it's Folsom Street. I don't know what to say. And it's fantastic. He represents the old dying god, like Crom Dub, and the energy of life and death, order and chaos, trading places. So again, that reinforcement of the gods of life, the gods of virility and fertility and abundance are taking a time out. They're having a nap. They're going for a smoke outside. Don't just leave them alone. Don't ask for an autograph. And the gods of death and transition and change and our psychopomps are coming in to take over the guidance. All right. Moving quickly on. Because in my usual form, I'm looking at the time, and I'm also looking at how long I've been streaming. My stream says... No, that's not true. Okay, that's a lie. Never mind. Technology. I will figure this out eventually. Here is our Samhain Sky Guide. I'll leave that up for a second so that you can get a screenshot if you need to. Even though I should probably be telling you, go buy my download. all of the slides are in the download. What are we dealing with at this time of year astronomically? We're really dealing with a lot of constellations that are undergirding and are sort of the embodiments of a lot of this change and flux stuff that's going on. First and foremost, October features two full moons in one. We had a full moon on the 1st, and we will have a full moon on the 31st in Taurus. And we'll talk about the astrology of that in just a second. The last full moon of the year falls on November 30th. And then the first full moon of winter is December 29th. And I have a bunch of really cool lists of different moon names in the workbook. We're going to skim over some stuff because I've rambled on too long. Why doesn't anybody interrupt me? I am the only person in this room. Okay, I got to figure that out. But we can say this about all of this stuff. The full moon closest to the fall equinox is called the harvest moon. And so that actually would have been our October 1st moon. And when it falls in October, it's the blood harvest moon. And this is the only full moon name determined by an event and not a month. If November's moon is the last full moon before Yule, it is called the morning moon. And so it is, in fact, November 30th is our last full moon of fall, the last full moon of autumn. last full moon before Yule. So this is the morning moon, M-O-U-R, morning. So constellations and fixed stars. If you've been in my class before, you know that I kind of go off a little bit on the constellations and fixed stars. We talked a lot about the relationship between Virgo and Libra, and then a little bit of Scorpio in our last class. Go watch the Mabon class if that stuff is curious, if you're intrigued by that stuff. So now we're going to talk about the other side of that equation, which is Libra and Scorpio. So for me, as I intimated in the Mabon class, for me, these three constellations really work together. Libra is the only sign, the only constellation in the zodiac that is a thing instead of a person or an animal. Every other sign is a person or an animal or a combination of that. Libra is the only sign that is a thing. It's often depicted as a lamp or a set of scales. Those are the traditional symbols that we see for Libra. And as we go back through the millennia of people sky watching and naming things in the sky, we see that the symbol or the constellation, the collection of stars that we think of as Libra, has been attached to Virgo or attached to Scorpio at various different times. When it's attached to Virgo, it is a lamp that's being held up by Virgo, and sometimes it's actually a light on the constellation's forehead. It's actually a beam or a beacon of light. And when it is attached to Scorpio, it is seen as a light being held in the claws of the scorpion. So in both of those regards, we're not seeing scales. We're actually seeing a lamp. Now, if we think of it as a character holding up scales, well, that's the Justice card and our archetype of justice, which is a very interesting thing, right? But if we think of it as this character with a lamp on their forehead or holding up a lamp, this connects us to some pretty potent stuff. Okay. For me, first off, I'm really intrigued by this imagery of this light being held ultimately by these two characters on either side of it. And who are these two characters? Well, on one side we have Virgo, who is the virgin. And on the other side we have Scorpio, sex and death. And so in a very reductive, let's just call it Christian, version of this idea, we have the virgin and the whore, right? We have the two sides of femininity, the two ways that femininity is supposed to express itself. But, anytime we see something like that, we're like, nope, there's got to be something else. There's more to the story. What's going on? What's the deal? So digging through and doing research for this, one of the things I discovered was that in Roman times, it was very normal when a baby was being born, there would be one woman or a few women that were actually there attending the mother as they're giving birth to the baby. And then across the room would be in darkness, and across the room would be a woman holding a torch to call the baby out with its light. And I think that is just an incredible image to think of. I also think that there's something probably here very, very potent about great goddesses from the past holding this illuminating light as we are going into the dark half of the year, holding some kind of knowledge or enlightenment of some sort as we're moving through the dark half of the year. So other names that we have for Libra are the scales or the lamp. And so let me talk about Scorpio a little bit more, because we talked a lot about Libra in the last class. Scorpio, the sign of Scorpio, actually rises backwards in the sky. Think of all of our backwards and undoing symbology that we're working with at this time of year. And here, Scorpio literally is thought of as rising backwards in the sky. And across from Scorpio in the sky, as the constellation of Scorpio is coming up and doing its thing, the constellation of Aries is going down. And Aries is me. It's the self. It's the great warrior, right? And so we have these forces of death coming up, and this force of virility being pushed down on the horizon. And I think that's just super potent. So I'm going to go into Scorpio stuff just a little bit here. Scorpios, the Greek word for scatter, is scorpizo. And it is related to the idea of penetrating. Here, Scorpios is akin to scorpizo, which means to scatter. Diaspero further means to scatter abroad, as in dia, and spiro, to sow seeds. Sowing seed is a metaphor, of course, for sexual intercourse. And Scorpio is the sign of sex and death, the beginning and ending of everything, right? Scorpios, the scorpion, was a giant scorpion sent by the earth goddess Gaia to slay Orion when he threatened to kill all of the beasts of the earth. The scorpion stung Orion on the heel. Very interesting occult connection there with the foot. He marked by the star Rigel, if you're looking at the constellation of Orion in the sky, and killed him. These two opponents are on opposite sides of the sky from each other. Scorpion rises, or not opposite sides of the sky, excuse me, they're on opposite sides of the Milky Way. The Scorpion rises as Orion starts to sink, and this was seen as Orion running away from his attacker. Together with Orion, these two constellations are gateways to the Milky Way. Now, remember that because it's important. The Akkadians called it the place where one bows down. This is talking about the constellation of Scorpio, or this portion of the sky. Others saw it as the symbol of darkness, showing the decline of the sun's power after the autumnal equinox, then located in it. Precession of the equinoxes, there's no time, go look it up, zodiacal precession. It's also been depicted in conjunction with the constellation Libra as a lamp held in the scorpion's claws. The sun actually only spends 9 days in the constellation of Scorpio, and the sun actually passes through the claws. That's the 9 days that it spends there. Alchemists believed it was only while the sun was in Scorpio that it was possible to turn iron into gold. Iron is ruled by Mars, the ancient planetary ruler of Scorpio. And Mars is the ruler of Aries. Scorpio contains the red giant Antares, and that star's name literally means anti-Aries, or against Aries, or against Mars, and is one of the 4 Babylonian guardian stars of the heavens, lying nearly on the ecliptic. These 4 stars were literally thought of as like the pillars of the universe. Mythologically, a sacred heart is that part of the sun or moon that at setting touches earth or sea on the horizon. The bruise it receives is poisonous in that it causes the whole body to collapse or sink. The Semang believe that at death, the soul leaves the body through the heel. So remember our wound at the heel. The heel is, as it were, the foundation stone of the human being with a characteristically upright stance. Once the heel is affected, the person falls down. However, another sign for this constellation is the eagle or the phoenix, indicating its ability to rise from the ashes, hearkening to the great rising and falling and rising again of the energies of this life, death, birth, process. And so, coming back to our astronomy, the constellation after Scorpio, of course, is Sagittarius. And the place in the sky where we imagine the constellation of Sagittarius, where it actually meets Capricorn, is called the Gate of God. And this was thought of as the place where souls ultimately exited after death. So people die throughout the year, and they would be, collected or sort of drifting around and wandering about Earth, sort of, dicking off, losing your socks for you, whatever it is that the dead do. And here at winter solstice would have been one of those times where they all get shot up into the gate of God and go back out into the universe, or back to the stars, back to the deities, back to over there, the other place. In fact, the Great Pyramid has a shaft in it that, if you move the sky backwards 4,000 years at winter solstice, Orion would cross directly over this shaft, and it was thought perhaps that this shaft was built specifically for this. Osiris and Orion are now thought of as probably, potentially, the same characters, the same deities or entities or archetypes. So there's a lot of stuff there in the Egyptian myth of Osiris becoming the deity of the dead, and then ultimately sort of becoming the psychopomp and shuttling all of these deities up or all of these souls that have died over the last year up to heaven, up to the lands of the gods, up to the stars at winter solstice. Other events that are happening at this time of year astronomically are a boatload of meteor showers, which I only put one on here. I don't know why. But we have the Orionid meteor showers happening from October 2nd to November 2nd. We have the Taurids happening from September 7th all the way to December 10th. And we have the Leonid meteor showers from November 6th to the 30th. The names, Orionids, Taurids, Leonids, show the constellation or the portion of the sky where it looks like the stars are radiating from. So that'll give you an idea of like where to sort of look. And what's really cool about that is anytime we have an abundance of meteor showers here on Earth, we see that echoed in lamp festivals. And of course we have Diwali, the Hindu, one of the largest lamp festivals in the Hindu cycle of the year, happening at this time of year. And there's lamp festivals for Buddhists and Southeast Asians all over. It's really cool. So there's really something about this energy sort of collecting up souls and guiding them towards this opening, this out. All right, so let's get into the astrology, and then we're going to talk about tarot. This was the astronomy. Now, let's look at the astrology. And this is our moon work for this time of year. Excuse me. This shirt has other ideas of how things are supposed to be going today. So, this is where we're going to take a moment. This has been a boatload of information, especially if this is your first time. Welcome. We have received a boatload of information. So, what do we do with all of this stuff? And I find that working with the astrology of the season really helps to coalesce all of this stuff that's can feel kind of fragmented, scattered, right? Scorpio. It can feel like, wow, this is just a massive bucket of information. What am I doing with all of this? I find that a lot of times if I really can focus on my astrology and I really focus on my tarot symbolism, that helps sort of coalesce or crystallize a lot of these seemingly paradoxical or disparate ideas into a cohesive moment, into a cohesive thing. Okay, so the first 3 to 4 weeks of Samhain season are covered by Scorpio. So we're doing scorpionic work during that time period. And then in the last 3 to 4 weeks, it is Sagittarius. And so we are doing Sagittarian work. And I'll talk about that in just a second. As the last rays of sunlight dwindle, Scorpio oversees a season of transformation. We are faced with the issues of sex and death and reconciling what we are learning from our shadow. It's time to dive deep. And so what we first get is the full moon in Taurus, and this is the Earth Mother's moon. This is a time to eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow we die. The moon wants us to get a little decadent and to pull out the extra chairs and invite the living and the dead, pull on a borrowed face, and revel in the excesses and the folly of the material world. 2020 has been batshit madhouse, bonkers, crazy, wild ass, WTF, extra, deluxe, son of, times 2, revenge, return of, right? Like, this year has been a lot, okay? Any one of the things that happened this year would have been a lot for us to deal with as a civilization, as a society. And we've had like 10 things handed to us at once. So if there was ever a time that you were going to cut loose and get a little crazy and like, kind of level of crazy, now is a time to do it. You are biologically supported by the natural biorhythms around you to kind of let go in this moment and get a little weird. So eat, drink, enjoy your body. As I was saying before, it's that idea of we need to insist life into things. We need to insist joy into this current reality stream. This current timeline is bonkers. And joy doesn't seem to be able to have an easy time getting to us. So we need to insist joy in the world and insist life. So this Taurus moon on October 31st, however is safe for you to revel, like go there. It's a Saturday night. Go there. Because then we have the new moon in Scorpio 14 days later. And this is the raging moon. As I started to say, the moon names are from Raven Caldera's Moon Phase Astrology. This is a fantastic book on astrology of understanding your moon in your natal chart and the phase that it's in and figuring that all out. So this is the full moon, the new moon in Scorpio at 23 degrees of Scorpio. If you want to pull out your natal chart, you can look up these degrees and see if you have anything there. If you have anything opposing or squaring that, and if that astrology stuff doesn't make sense, to worry about it. But it's potent and it's hard, and it's spooky and it's dark, and this is also our very best time for shadow work. And if you haven't engaged that process by that point, the new moon is November 14th. If you haven't engaged the process by then, now is the time. By the middle of November, it absolutely is time. Now, there's a lot to be said here about being safe and being healthy, and keeping yourself in a place that is not going to put you in harm's way, right? Mental health is real, especially this year. So what I encourage for you is to do what is healthy for you. I also encourage you, in whatever way is healthy for you, go into the scary parts. Go into the uncomfortable stuff. You are not going to have an easier time at any other time of year than now. And I think a lot of us shy away from this kind of work, or we flinch away from it because it almost feels like, oh my God, if I open up this door, who knows what's going to come flooding out? Will I ever get control back over myself? Yeah, you will. You will. But shoving these things down into the dark and into the unconscious forever will not make them go away. I mean, it didn't work for racism in our country, so it's not going to work for your daddy issues either. You got to deal with this stuff. You've got to let it come out and say what it needs to say. That's part of why these energies and these entities have so much rage. That's the raging moon, is because we never give them the chance to say what they need to say. And we don't need to stay in those places. We don't need to stay in conjunction with those energies and with those feelings, but they need to be allowed to express themselves. Like a wound that is festering, we've got to let the pus out, or this is going to poison the whole system. We have to let these things be said. We have to allow ourselves to consciously acknowledge that we are feeling these fears, these frustrations, that we feel this anger, that we seek revenge, all that stuff. Like, we don't have to live in that energy, but we do need to acknowledge that energy and let it speak its piece, or it poisons everything. It gets in everything. There's just no way to avoid it. And then we move into Sagittarius, which is perfect forever. Sagittarius is the best sign. It's perfect in every way. But I think that there's a real potent image here of moving like a psychopomp would from the darkness and the hell, if you want, the sex and the death and the gristle of Scorpio into Sagittarius energy. As we move into Sagittarius energy, we see the Great Mother turn into the Great Crone, and she really becomes this really incredibly powerful embodiment of abstract wisdom and enlightenment and experience. If there was ever a time where the goddess might feel a little remote to us, I think it's now at the very last weeks of Samhain, and into Yule. I think here she maybe feels like she's a bit remote. She's very abstract, and she's literally the embodiment of wisdom. And so as we move through our Sagittarius season, we have our full moon in Gemini, and then our new moon in Sagittarius right before Capricorn kicks in, right before the winter solstice. The new moon in Sagittarius is December 14th. And so there is very much this movement from the dark and the gristle and the skeleton into what is beyond even death. What is that thing? That's a lot of Sagittarius energy. And I know Sagittarians are often described as these like goofy, happy-go-lucky horses, you know, traveling from place to place. And that's all true about Sagittarius energy too. But also there is this potential for this embodiment of enlightenment, this embodiment of wisdom in there. Briefly, Samhain is the witch's new year, and there is an opportunity to hit the reset button on personal and spiritual matters. Forgive, release debts, financial, energetic, and otherwise, between you and other people. Samhain season shuts the door on the bright part of the year. Our fields are barren, our fruits have been picked, branches lay bare, scratching at the stormy skies. The Puka fairy has come and poisoned with mold and mildew anything that's left in the fields, and you can't touch it after that. It's dead. So all of that stuff just has to be left to rot. We might have been able to logically rationalize the shift during Mabon, but now we feel the earth dying and changing into the crone. Along with this dissolution, our sense of reality shimmers like chimera, like we're watching the world from underwater. We wander amongst the veggies in the garden, dying on the vine, the last of our fruit left to rot on the branch. Twisting forlorn and warped in the frosty night wind. Mold creeps across the flowers we exchanged only months ago. We walk in a liminal space, cloaked in shadows. Both reveling in the destruction and living your best life in the face of it all are appropriate responses to the energy of Samhain season. We can see through the veils of time and space. So work with this and reach out lovingly to the dead ones and to ephemeral spirits who are otherwise unavailable. The last half of Samhain season is overseen by Sagittarius. We become accustomed to walking among the spirits, remembering that death makes us all family, but losing our grip on the physical reality a little bit. And maybe that's okay. Ritual, ceremony, and faith can help us wander in this holy space for the short time that we are here. Listen for and document the messages from the other side. Renew your spirit. Okay. So I have a few journal entries for you to work with this moon stuff here, with the Taurus and Scorpio moons. This harvest has been intense. We've pulled in a lot of karma. Eat, drink, and be merry. Worship your body. Get in and live in your skin. Meats, sweets, and blood. Right? And then in the new moon in Scorpio, if you have not already, now is the time to engage your shadow work. What is your rage? What is your fear? And what is your helplessness? And again, how that is safe and real for you, but do it. Okay. Now, moving on to tarot. These are the two big tarot helpers that I think are the most important. However, these... Oh, am I going to be able to get it on here? Burp, 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 burp. Maybe not. There we go. These are the three tarot helpers that I actually think you need to work with. And if you'll notice, here, there's some differences in the way that these two cards are drawn. This is the Pamela Coleman Smith Waite or Rider-Waite, Smith-Rider-Waite deck. Very traditional. Lots of people recognize it. You see this in movies. It's really easy to find. This is the Builders of the Aditum deck, and I actually prefer to work with this deck. There's not massive changes. The changes are pretty subtle, but they're there all the same. So why this collection? Why this boy band of tarot cards? Seems like a pretty fun... Yes, 23 degrees has been getting hit over and over again. 23 and 8 degrees. Well, we can talk about it after class. So why this boy band? Okay. Death, the card, Death, is ruled by the sign of Scorpio. We're doing a lot of work in that sign. The Tower is ruled by the planet Mars. That is the ancient ruler of Scorpio. We already talked about that. And the Judgment card, in some traditions, is associated with the planet Pluto. And that is the modern astrological planetary ruler of Scorpio. So those are the three major arcana cards that I recommend working with. You can put these on your altar. They are great stand-ins for any archetypes that you might want to work with. And then if you want to get into the minor arcana, if you are a tarot reader or you are a tarot student or explorer, focusing on the suit of cups while we are moving through Scorpio season, and specifically the 5 of Cups, 6 of Cups, and 7 of Cups. In some magical traditions, that is 5, Mars in Scorpio, 6, Sun in Scorpio, which we are experiencing astronomically or astrologically, and then 7 is Venus in Scorpio. Okay, I'm just going to leave this up and read for you so you can concentrate on these characters. The image we encounter in the Death, Tower, and Judgment cards strike at the core of most people who see them. The concepts are literally and similarly daunting. In the Death card, we are faced with profound transformation, a literal death of the old state of being. In the Tower, we are faced with the psychological effects of our world being flipped upside down as reality proves everything we know is wrong. And in the Judgment card, the horn of truth blows over the heads of the dead, rising out of the graves. What do we make of all of this? As unlikely as it may seem, these 3 cards are a reminder of the connectivity between all beings in the universe. Our fear, our greed, our wounds that we carry, all keep us separated from each other. But death, i.e. change, reminds us we are all golden shafts of wheat growing up out of the same ground. And yeah, it's gonna take the best from us, and we will be forced to adapt if we want to progress. But we will continue to suffer our losses and suffer being abandoned or betrayed, or suffer from our own delusions and projections and fantasies of persecution, if we only see change and chaos as an attack on us personally. The Tower, also called the House of God or La Maison Dieu, in some decks, represents the ego death we experience when we remember that we are all emanations from the same source, that all beings experience these forces. It's not personal. And that all of these things that we have built a sense of self with are actually illusions. We may want to lash out or distrust anyone who seems to relieve us from our own responsibility or dissolve our fears in substance. But the Judgment card reveals that our fears around change are unfounded. Yes, parts of us will die as old pieces evolve or fall away. We need to mourn our wounds and the pain that unexpected chaos inflicts on us, forgive our foolishness, and thank the parts of us that have utilized broken coping mechanisms that kept us alive. When we push through fears of losing ourselves, because of course there is no self, we push our imagination and our hearts to the limits of the cosmos. we stretch out beyond ourselves, and we remember we are part of something more. So, these three cards are really trying to guide us through a process that is really scary and totally unavoidable at the same time. Whether that is a literal physical death, which I generally don't think the death card actually means that. I think it means profound transformation, profound transition that cannot be fought, cannot be stopped, can't be bought off. Just like real death, just like fall turning into winter, we can't stop this process. And we can get really alienated and really, really freaked out by seeing this chaos and this change and this disorder as if it's coming at us, trying to come and get us. Versus remembering, oh, we are all a fraternity and we all go through this change in our season, in our time, in our way, but we all go through this. We all have our highs and lows. We all have our triumphs and our setbacks. That is the fraternity of humanity. And in particular, we will all die. These bodies will crumble to dust. And that also is a type of fraternity. Think of the image of Saturn or Mars or any of our vegetation gods out there in the fields with the great sickle, shunk, cutting off the golden heads of wheat. And what does that wheat do? It rises back up again. Shunk. There goes another golden head. And it rises back up again. Shunk. It's almost like a rhythm you could breathe to or dance to or fuck to. I mean, if you're really macabre, right? Okay, so in your ritual work, in your celebrations that you partake in, I see that it's 7:03. I know I'm going over. I'm going to wrap this up very quickly, I promise. References for ritual work, forms of observance. You have your options. Do one or the other or both in their season, in their time. You can do celebration work and you can do shadow work stuff. Costume parties, feasts, and bonfires, sex or sensual contact, whatever that means for you, playing pranks, divination, all are a part of the celebratory elements of stuff. And on the shadow side, divination is over there too, right? Sacrifice and propitiation, whatever that looks like for you, communion with the dead, walking in labyrinths or mazes and holding dumb suppers. We are very much coming to the very center of the spiral, which is why spirals and gateways are some of the symbols that we work with at this time of year. Let's move on to that. There we go. Hey. And in particular, whether it's celebratory or reverential, whether it's solemn or it's bombastic, magical workings of all kinds are very, very potent at this time of year. So when you are building altars, you can wear these things as jewelry. You could take a Sharpie and write it on your t-shirt or your underwear or whatever. You can work with these types of symbols in any way that you want to throughout the Samhain season. Gateways, a spiral, skulls and bones, spider webs, labyrinths, masks, and brooms. Brooms in particular, just because they're cool and witchy. I totally meant to bring my broom over here and show it off. Damn it. Okay. Check out Broomcraft on Instagram. But they also are about sweeping and cleaning and purifying and clearing away the ashes and clearing away the old to get ready for whatever comes next. So symbols, gateways, spirals, brooms, jack-o'-lanterns, obviously, pictures of ancestors, images of death and decay, the image of a waning moon, but also grapes and wine and intoxicants and whatever that means for you, whatever relationship you have with intoxication that can come from a lot of different sources. Skulls and spiders, spirals and gateways, all very, very appropriate to work with at this time of year. If you are making altars or work tables, as some folks call them, you have the choice of creating altars celebrating life and lustiness or death and transition, or both. You could do them at opposite ends of the house. You could split a table in two and have one black, one white. jack-o'-lanterns and piles of candy and masks and twinkle lights and stuff like that. If you are working with pictures of ancestors, make sure everyone is dead. Please do not put pictures of living relatives unless you've got issues. That's fine. I'm not judging, but but only use pictures of people that have already died, please. And when we talk about ancestors, of course, we're talking about blood relatives. Of course, we're talking about people that we think of as being in our family. But family is something that we build now, right? So so your accumulated family, maybe there was an ancestor of a person that stepped in and played the role of a parent or played the role of a mentor or a guide to you that was more of like a family member. Of course they count. But I also think of cultural ancestors. Get out the pictures of David Bowie and Divine. Get out the pictures of Prince, right? And Aaliyah. Like, let them also guide us and help us, and let's give them a little candy and a little sukkah, and, right? Get some purple lace on the altar. Like, let's do it up for these cats. They did so much for us. So the least we can do is put out, some pads for Divine, right? Maybe, a glass of something for somebody. That is also totally, totally appropriate. So food and drink, obviously, like we were saying, feasting is really, really important. All of these foods are totally appropriate to use in your meals, as decoration, what have you, pomegranates, of course. It's like this every year. I'm like almost 10 minutes over. I never got around to talking about Persephone's Underworld Journey. Never talked about Inanna's Underworld Journey. Maybe I will do a part 2 to this video. Maybe I will just do another live stream for Samhain and get to all the stuff that I didn't get to. It'll be free if I do it. Don't worry about it. So all of this stuff is totally appropriate to put on your altars and decorate your house with, as well as to eat. These are animal helpers that we can work with that tie into a lot of our myths and deities that we are working with at this time of year. These are either forms that they take, animal helpers that they work with, or animals that are traditionally sacrificed to them. These are incense and oils and a group of plant helpers that are very, very appropriate to work with at this time of year. In particular, mastic resin, benzoin, and wormwood are all very, very appropriate. And broom is becoming one of my favorite things to work with, along with hazel as a replacement for doing what we call smudging or clearing with smoke. Instead of using white sage, which of course is appropriated, no time to talk about it, but as a way of getting white sage out of your repertoire, bringing in broom is a really, really great replacement, especially for this time of year. Mineral helpers, if you like to put stones on your altar, or if you want to wear jewelry like I wear a ton of it right now. Opals of all kinds, topaz, obsidian, carnelian. These stones are all geared toward celebrating abundance. Things like topaz and opal, carnelian as well. Bloodstone too, celebrating virility and life. Things that are dedicated to protection, like obsidian and onyx, smoky quartz, jet, black tourmaline, even flint is used for protection work, and labradorite, as well as some of these other cats, onyx and obsidian, are really great for all kinds of magical work. Labradorite in particular wants to participate in ritual and earth-based magical forms. So I have discovered. Plant helpers that you're working with, anything that's dead and dying right now is really appropriate. Anything that is a part of the harvest is really appropriate. Bringing in leaves from outside and dead branches and things like that. Don't set your house on fire with candles and shit, but that sort of stuff. Fly agaric, if you can manage to harvest a mushroom and not have it instantly disintegrate into mush. That is very appropriate, but all types of mushrooms at this time of year. If there is any living entity on Earth that is a decomposition deity, it is a mushroom, it is fungus, and they are totally here to help us at this time of year. Break it down. And so, last but not least, we've actually gotten to the end. You can use these meditations in ritual. You can use them as journal starts throughout the season if you like. Maybe work on stuff. You've got some journal entry work for your new moon and full moon, so you might use these on different weeks in between those moons. But basically, I encourage you to choose an ancestor. And of course, that's a blood ancestor, cultural ancestor, what have you. write them a letter describing their gifts to you and burn that letter to release the energy. Of course, I'm talking about an ancestor, so we are talking about somebody who's dead. This is not a person that, in theory, you're going to be able to hand this letter to. If you have a way of doing that, cool. Don't burn it. Do it. But otherwise, release the energy to that entity, that being, through fire. Fire! Okay. Consider the elders in your life. In what ways are you becoming a good ancestor? Or you might also ask yourself here, am I doing work to become a good ancestor? How could I do better here on this work? We are all living ancestors to someone. Someone in the future, no pressure, is looking back to us right now in these moments where we are trying to figure this stuff out. Our ancestors were also faced with wild, wild circumstances that they ultimately lived through, right? Because we're here as proof. And so we too ultimately lived through this stuff. We're proof because the future is out there looking back at us for help and assistance. So how are you becoming a good ancestor? Or are you becoming a good ancestor? Are there things that you need to work on to become a good ancestor? Great time to do that kind of personal work with yourself right now. And then explore your feelings and thoughts around the idea of age and death as teachers. And I might also put the word decomposition. How is decomposition a teacher to you right now? At Beltane season, we are growing life. At Samhain season, we are growing death. And so how is age, how is death, how is decomposition teaching you or demonstrating or mentoring you as a form of teacher? Last but not least, wait, no, that I already said that, so I guess I lied. Let me say massive, juicy, incredible, delicious, wonderful thanks you to my patrons. Oh my God. I can't even fit everybody's name on here anymore. In December, I had 10 patrons. So let me just say, thank you so much. Oh my God. Wow. You guys are absolutely the stars of the show. You did this. You people have made it possible for me to make these classes free. And it feels so good and so right for me to be able to give this work as an offering to Earth, especially in this time of massive transition and massive upheaval that, and I would hope awakening that a lot of folks are going through. So thank you so much for your support. It's just incredible. And also let me say thank you to my students. These are folks that I'm working more and less closely with to various degrees. Some of these folks are doing double duty, like Patty and Eva, who are both year-long Wheel of the Year students and patrons. So thank you, and thank you. Also, some other folks here who are year-long Wheel of the Year students and folks that are participating in my tarot mentorship program where they work with me one-on-one for tarot stuff. We have arrived at the end. Thank you so much for joining me for this class. This has been incredible, even though I am here by myself in this room. It's been really fantastic. If you would love to keep working with me, if you are intrigued about this information and want to know more about Samhain or more about the Wheel of the Year, you can check out my website, www.meganangus.com. You can go there and just read what I've got on my website, join my newsletter for seasonal information, join my Patreon, follow me on social media, Megan Angus everywhere. And you can become even more involved and do client work with me. I do tarot readings, astrology readings, and tarot and astrology readings for my clients, as well as my tarot mentorship program, where you work one-on-one with me to study tarot. And last but not least, I've said that 3 times now, so clearly none of that was true. Next class is October 29th. Next week, it is the Death card. We will be diving deep on that stuff that we just scratched the surface on with Death, the Tower, the Judgment card. We will also talk about the Fool card, so we get the whole boy band in there. That is October 29th. Next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. That is a private class reserved for my patrons, my year-long Wheel of the Year students, and my Tarot Mentorship Program students. My Patreon starts at $1, so you can join my Patreon and get that class. It is recorded, and if you're at the $9 and up level, you can have access to the recording and all the slides and extra resources and materials that I put in for that class. The next Wheel of the Year class will be Yule, and that is December 12th. Same thing, same bat time, same bat channel. That'll be right here on my YouTube channel. You can subscribe. I don't know where the button is, but you can subscribe and get an announcement or become a patron or join my newsletter, and, you know, lots of places where I'm blowing the trumpets. Like the Judgment card, right? Okay. That is actually legitimately it. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy Samhain, happy death, happy transformation, happy transition, happy undoing, happy unbeing, happy unspiraling, happy decomposition. I bless and bless and bless all of the parts of you that are dead and need to go. Let's let that shit go. Huh? Right? And clear space for whatever the magic is that winter solstice is bringing us, for whatever is coming in the future. Let us let go of the things that we're afraid of, that bring us rage, that bring us frustration and torment, as much as we can, right? And welcome in chaos. Because if we don't make room for chaos, chaos will make its room. Thank you so much for joining me. Mwah. Blessed be. Happy Samhain. Bye. Bum 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 bum. Do do do.